Hello everyone, welcome back to The Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. If you're an archer and you want to experience accuracy and consistency and success in your archery experience, and one of the first things that you need to do is make sure your bow is completely tuned, that everything's working the way it's supposed to, and that arrow is flying straight and true off of your bow. And one of the first ways you're going to find to do that, there's several different ways that you can tune, but one of the most common ways you're going to find to do that is paper tuning, where you shoot that arrow through paper and you read the tear to tell if there needs to be an adjustment on that bow. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to assume if you're watching this video that you already understand paper tuning. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but I do want to show you today how I built this new paper tuning stand for myself. Now, certainly, if you don't want to do this, you could go to a good shop and they could help you do it. And most good shops are going to have a paper tuning station. But I wanted something where I could tinker with my own equipment at home and I could pull it out whenever I needed and be able to use it. Now, one of the things that I wanted in this build was something a little bit more compact where I could easily store it in my shed. I had a previous stand that was a big wooden frame and it was just too bulky. It stayed outside and ended up rotting out. So I wanted something that I could store inside that'd be compact. But I also wanted something for myself that I could mount on top of a tripod. So I am a photographer, a videographer, and I've got several tripods. And so I wanted to adapt this so that I didn't need to have a whole stand. I could just pull out a tripod and mount my paper tuning station on top of the stand. Now, don't be alarmed if you don't have tripods. There's other ways that you could mount this for sure. You could build other kinds of frames for this, but that's just the way I'm going to do it on this video. I also should mention that I got this idea online. I searched for a paper tuning station, a paper tuning stand, and I found one that had a whole roll of paper in the bottom and you could just pull it up, and as your paper got worn off, you could tear it off and pull some more up. I really liked it, but it was about $70, and I thought, you know what? I can do it cheaper. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing apart, I'm going to lay out all the pieces, and I'm going to talk you through the pieces that you need, the parts that you need, and show you how to put it all together. All right, so if you haven't already figured it out from the intro, the whole goal of this paper tuning station is to have a roll of paper in the bottom and be able to pull it up and cut it off as necessary. And so as a result, the bottom piece of this is going to be a larger piece of PVC pipe than the rest of the frame. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But what we're going to start with is choosing our paper. And what I've chosen to use here is just regular parchment paper that you can find in the kitchen department of your local store. This is the Boulder brand. I'm sure any brand will be fine. And it is 15 inches wide by 12 yards or 36 feet long. So that should give me a good number of shots through this paper before I have to buy a new roll. So what I've done is I've kind of based it off of this roll being 15 inches wide, and I've made all my measurements and adjusted from there as necessary. So you may want to make sure that you can find something about this size or adjust the measurements to whatever is available in your area. So I determined that that particular roll, I could wind it up tightly and it would fit just nicely inside of an 1.5 inch piece of PVC pipe. Now, what you're going to need, at least if you use the same dimensions I do, is 15 inches wide, but you're going to need to leave a little bit of extra room for the couplings and make sure you've got a little bit of wiggle room. And so I decided to cut my piece of PVC, my 1.5 inch piece of PVC, to 18 inches long. Just be aware when you go to your big box store like Lowe's or Home Depot, they normally sell these in 2-foot sections, which is plenty. You can cut off a couple of inches and have just the right size. But if you're like me and you end up messing your first piece, you're probably going to regret not buying the longer piece for just a little bit more money. Typically, you can either buy a 5-foot or a 10-foot piece. I bought the 5-foot piece and I was glad I did because I messed up the first piece and then I had some extras to go around. So let me tell you what I messed up. And so in order to make this work, I needed to cut a slit down the middle of the pipe in order to get the paper up through. What I did not account for, however, is that there's a lot of tension on this PVC. And as soon as I ran this, I took it on a table saw and I ran it down the table saw. If you're going to use a saw, please be careful and take the appropriate precautions. I don't want anybody getting hurt. But as soon as I did that, the whole pipe collapsed on itself and actually bound up in the saw because it was pinching the saw blade. Fortunately, I was able to get it through and I took another pass. At that point, I had the perfect gap to get the paper up through and everything was good, or so I thought. Unfortunately, once you take out that gap and the pipe shrinks on itself, it now no longer fits tightly on the couplings that we'll address in just a moment. So what I did for the piece that I've actually ended up using is I ended up having, and you can see my paper is still inside of here, but I ended up having to cut a groove down the middle without actually cutting all the way to both ends. It does make it a much more difficult cut, and it also makes it more difficult to get the paper in because instead of being able to slide the whole roll in with a tag sticking up and then just sliding it in. Now you actually have to stick it in and then fish it up through that hole, which is kind of challenging and a bit of a pain. It's a flaw in the design, I know, but for me, 36 feet of paper is going to last me a long while, and one little, few minutes of trying to fuss to getting it through is going to be worth having all of the fittings fit properly. So I have an 18-inch piece here with a groove cut down the middle, but about an inch on each end where the groove is not all the way to the end. That way the end keeps its form and it fits nicely on these fittings. So again, this is an 18-inch piece of 1.5 PVC pipe. Now the next thing you're gonna need are some fittings. These are 1.5 by 3/4 T's. So what that means is that it's a T, and both sides right here is 1.5 inch, but this is 3/4 inch. Now you could choose other sizes, but this is a readily available fitting, and I already had some 3/4 inch PVC pipe lying around the house, so that worked out well for me. Now, I guess really you could use an elbow here instead of a T, but finding an elbow that goes from 1.5 to 3/4 is much more difficult to find than a T that goes from 1.5 and 3/4. So you're gonna need 2 of those, and all that you're gonna do is put those on either end of this 1.5 piece down here where you're gonna put your paper. You do wanna put your paper in it first. And like I said, that's a bit of a challenge, so I'm not gonna show you that, but you'll just have to kind of wiggle it and use a needle nose pliers and get down in there and do the best you can. Now from here, the next thing you're gonna need to do is determine how tall you want it. What I've decided is that I'm gonna take 2 pieces of PVC pipe. This is 3/4 inch PVC pipe that will fit those fittings I just mentioned, and I've made these 24 inches tall. It will give me a decent amount of paper to shoot at without having to reposition the paper. So all we're gonna do, really simple, is actually just stick this in the sides here. And the next thing you're gonna need is 2 3/4 inch elbows. Stick these on, and at that point, you're gonna wanna measure and double check the length of your top piece. Now for me, my bottom piece here, it's 1.5 inches, is 18 inches long, but in order to make this fit properly up here, just because of the way the fittings are different, you're reducing size, actually to make this about 18 3/4 inches, and then you just put it all together. Now, I did not glue any of mine. I'm leaving it just like this. And part of the reason for that is if I really want to make this small for storage, it's very easy just to pull it all apart, put a rubber band or a strap around it or something, and store it somewhere, and it will take up very, very little space. And all these fittings fit well together without having to really need any glue. They're not going to come apart for the little bit of strain that's going to be on it when you shoot an arrow through it. Now the next thing that you're going to need is some sort of a clamp or some system to hold your paper up to the top. And what I chose is I already had some of these really cheap clamps. I got them at Ollie's. I think they were like a couple bucks for a 6-pack. And I just put them up here so I can bring my paper up, fold it over the top, and put the clamp at the top. Now one thing that I noticed, however, is that it tended to be if you touched it or when your arrow went through, it might pull out a little bit of slack from the paper. And so what I did is I took a couple of these little binder clips right here, and I put them on a rubber band, put the rubber band around the side pipe here, and then they can stretch over and they can clamp on the bottom, holding the paper tight. Now you're gonna see this is a very, very small binder clip, and I think what I'm gonna do is try to replace these with a little bit bigger clips that have a little bit more grip strength to really hold that paper well. Now the last piece here that's for my setup is this bracket right here. And this is a 3D printed bracket that I designed that will perfectly fit this PVC pipe at the bottom. Just like that, you can hear it snap in place, but it also has a way to mount to my tripod. So it's designed to take a 1/4-20 nut right here and be embedded in the top, and that means I can screw in my tripod plate to the bottom, and then I can come over here to my tripod, and I can mount it to my tripod, and then I can simply just take this paper tuning stand and sit it right on top. It's friction fit. So far, that's not been a problem. If you do bump it, it may fall over. Of course, if you needed to, you could glue it. Now, I fully realize that a lot of you don't have a 3D printer. If you do, I'm gonna make sure this file's up on Thingiverse, and you can go download it and print it yourself in whatever material you feel is best. I will say this though, there's other options. You could take pipe like this if you have a little bit left over, and you could cut some out and make something for the pipe to snap into, and you could get it to snap in place that way. If you got a place where you shoot where you could hang this, you could easily hang this from a rafter. There's a lot of different ways. And of course, if you wanted to, you could make some sort of a PVC frame as well if you wanted to make the whole thing out of PVC, including your stand. Now, let's go outside and shoot a few arrows through it. So I've been working on tuning a new to me bow, and the grip is a lot different, and the rest wasn't set perfectly at center shot. So there's a number of things going on here. So I had to take a lot of shots through paper. I'm starting to get a pretty good cluster of holes right there in the center where I'm shooting level through the paper. So I'm going to pull it up just a little bit and keep shooting. All right, so this is what I'm getting with the bare shaft right now. Feeling really good about that. And the paper tuner told me exactly what I needed to know to get this bow all tuned up. All right, there it is, my version of a paper tuning stand with 36 feet of paper inside a tube that you can feed out as you need it. Lightweight, small, compact enough to be stored easily, and mount on a tripod. If you enjoyed the video, let me know what you think of it down in the comments. Leave me any suggestions if you have ideas of a way to improve this concept. And until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.